Hi, my name is Abe Stein. I'm the audio director here at Gambit and also the embedded staff member for PIERRE Insanity Inspired, this week's Game of the Week. PIERRE Insanity Inspired is a game that started with a research question about failure communication. This research came from Jesper Yule, who was working at our lab. He was interested in how players respond to varying failure communication, varying from mean to nice.
Are you always this useless? You'll never be able to do this! You're ugly and worthless. That wasn't fair!
So the constraint for our project was that we needed to make a game that communicated differently, mean and nice to the player when they failed in the game, and that communication of the failure would change as you play, so that we could then collect data on the player as they're playing. That we can then use to look at how they're responding to the failure communication being mean or the failure communication being nice. With a fairly I'm just trying to think of what I want to go next. Yeah. We had a pretty wide open canvas in terms of how we could make this game. The constraint from the research was about failure communication, so the narrative of the game and the mechanics for the game were fairly wide open, and so we saw an opportunity to kind of design the gameplay first and then start looking at how we're going to communicate the failure. Moving forward from there, we continued to have discussions with Jesper, the researcher, and Jason Beggy, our research assistant, on how we're going to communicate failure. We were clear that we didn't want failure communicated with difficulty. We didn't want the game getting harder or easier to communicate failure. And we also needed to make sure that the failure communication was being directed towards the player and not towards any character on the screen. While we were having these discussions, the team began working on a narrative for the game and developed this narrative around an artistic cat who was collecting materials for his masterpiece sculpture. The art style was inspired by, I would say, some Gendy Tartakovsky, who was the designer for Samurai Jack, as well as abstract painters and surrealist painters. It had a very kind of otherworldly, crazy, weird vibe, which we were driving for very early on. And one stumbling block that we ran into early was we were doing a good job of creating nice feedback and having a really hard time writing mean feedback. And so we had some very fun design meetings where we would sit around and brainstorm insults, basically, really mean things that you could say, and it was a bit of a challenge. We took lots of baby steps, and then we probably took a really large step and maybe crossed the line, which was good because then we could dial it back a little bit and get it, rated PG. In the end, we have a fun game where you're kind of playing this action platformer. At the same time, you're dealing with a character who is yelling at you or being rather nice to you. So I hope you can head over to our website and play PIERRE Insanity Inspired and either enjoy it or hate it or feel good about yourself or feel awful, depending upon how you're being yelled at. So I hope you enjoy it.
That was good. That's